Welcome to Inside India. I'm JP Ong, and here are your headlines. President Trump announces a slew of hefty new tariffs targeting pharmaceuticals, home furniture, and large trucks unless they build in the United States. It's a fresh escalation in the trade war, but what could it mean for a trade deal with India? India is also considering easing foreign investment rules that would make it easier for e-commerce companies to buy and sell directly. And India inks a major $7 billion deal for homegrown fighter jets from state warplane maker Hindustan Aeronautics in a big push to modernize its armed forces. Good morning and happy Friday, but it's looking like a frantic Friday based on how Asian markets are trading in the first hours of the morning session. We are seeing significant shades of red across major indices, and also after the Trump administration unleashed another round of fresh tariffs, this time sectorially targeting goods such as branded pharmaceuticals and that of trucks. We're seeing the likes of the Nikkei 225 down by about 0.33%, and the South Korean Kospi perhaps taking it the hardest on the chin. They've fallen by more than 2% intraday. Seeing a little bit of resilience, though, for the ASX 200 in Australia with the likes of, despite the fact that we've seen pharma stocks, they're also in the red. Also a little bit of steadiness, that is, in Southeast Asia with the Straits Times Index and the Bursa KLCI in Malaysia, both in the green, but albeit very marginally so. The Indian markets will come online in about 45 minutes. Well, here's what GIFT Nifty futures are indicating. And once again, we are seeing that GIFT Nifty futures are foreshadowing a possible 70-point increase. But remember that the Nifty itself has shown Nifty futures that are higher than the previous day's close, but is now on a 5-day losing streak and has also fallen below that 25,000 level. We'll see if GIFT Nifty futures will indeed hold, and if we see a decent open when the opening bell actually rings. The Indian rupee now back to softer or weakening ways at 88.76 against the U.S. dollar. U.S. President Trump, as we mentioned, is unveiling a range of new tariffs just a couple of hours ago. He's now taking aim at heavy-duty trucks, kitchen cabinets, bathroom vanities, and even upholstered furniture. On a post on Truth Social, Trump said the duties on finishing was due to a flooding of cheap imports into the market from countries like Vietnam and Malaysia. Trump said the 25% tariff on trucks is to protect local manufacturers from, quote, unfair outside competition. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce says most of these vehicles are imported from American allies like Mexico, Canada, Japan, and Germany. We'll be watching shares of Mahindra & Mahindra at the open, the companies being one of the largest overseas supplier of semi-trucks to the United States. The biggest new tariff is a hefty 100% duty on imported, branded, and patented drugs, unless companies are building manufacturing plants in the United States. Japanese and Chinese pharma stocks slid on the news. You'll see here the likes of Sumitomo Pharma, for instance, falling by about 5%. Jiangsu Hengrui also down or in the red, plunging by about 3.9%. And of course, we'll be watching India's pharma stocks like Dr. Reddy's and Sun Pharma when the opening bell rings. Meanwhile, India's government could be planning on easing foreign investment rules that could benefit e-commerce companies. Reports say the regulatory tweak, that is, could allow overseas retailers such as Amazon to buy products directly from Indian sellers and in turn sell these products overseas. The issue has been discussed for years, with Amazon actively lobbying the New Delhi government for the policy shift. Critics of the move say that this could impact the ability of Indian small businesses to compete globally. Jitendra Nath Misra is the former Indian ambassador to Portugal and Laos and is the current professor of diplomatic practice at the Jindal School of International Affairs. And he joins us now to make sense of the latest wrinkle and development with regards to the Indian-U.S. trade relations and how this might be impacting broader diplomatic relations overall. Jitendra, thank you so much for joining us. Despite Commerce Minister Goyal's recent visit to the United States, it seems that the hits keep on coming. On one hand, you had those broad reciprocal tariffs, the tariffs because of Russian oil, you had the H-1B visas, and now, of course, you're seeing a possible hit on the pharmaceutical sector, which is very important for Indian industry. What are you making of these, and how are you viewing the new pharma tariffs being proposed, and whether or not it's complicating any efforts to try to get to a favorable trade deal that's seen as beneficial for both?
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. As far as pharmaceuticals is concerned, I had read several months ago that India has about 60 to 70% of the generic drugs market in the United States. That means a lot of people who are not, who cannot afford expensive drugs depend on Indian generic drugs. And that, I thought, was a significant leverage that India had on the on the US consumer directly. And therefore, there's a constituency of support. But it seems to me that pharma was off the table. Now it's 100%. So it's a very escalatory step, no doubt, by the United States. But I still feel that it is more of a negotiating strategy than more. I don't think there is a desire to rupture the relationship. There is a desire to make India blink and for India to concede as much as possible from the US point of view, leading to the trade agreement.
Mr. Misra, this has been quite a bit of mixed messaging. This is something that some of your peers in the diplomatic circles have told us over the last couple of weeks, that is. As a former ambassador, how unusual is it when it comes to negotiations and diplomatic relations to see this kind of mixed messaging, especially when it plays out in such a public fashion? Because usually, whenever you see some of these tensions, they're usually kept behind the curtain, that is, and confined to back channels, perhaps. Is this an unusual thing, or is this par for the course, especially when you're dealing with a country like the United States?
Well, I don't think public messaging is unusual in diplomacy. Indian diplomats usually say that we like to work behind the scenes and not in the glare of the media. But sometimes we do. With Pakistan, for example, we are always conducting diplomacy very publicly, and that's meant for a domestic audience. So the US is doing it very publicly, also meant for a domestic audience. And India is not doing it publicly because India doesn't have too many cards. So therefore, the mixed messaging is coming from the United States right now, less from India. India is lying low. India is, I said in an interview with the BBC that India will have to let the storm pass. And this is the biggest crisis until there comes the next biggest crisis. So it's not the first time. The US has given mixed messages to India over decades, many decades, 50, 60, 70 years. We were the most sanctioned country after the nuclear tests of 1974, for example. But paradoxically, after the 1998 nuclear tests, when India was able to demonstrate its ability to project hard power, then the United States was willing to talk to India. So India has to do something that can hurt the United States in some way for the United States to shift from mixed messaging to positive messaging. I don't know what that will be, but I think India should do that tactically.
And it seems that strength is something that the Trump administration especially responds to quite favorably or quite openly to. You mentioned a while also before that the recent moves, such as the H-1B visas, for instance, was the latest lever, it seems, that the United States can pull on India. I'm curious, because of your comments about India weathering the storm, how many more levers should India potentially prepare for, given the fact that we've gone through all of these possible headwinds that have been announced, and basically, I mean, just trying to get an idea of how long this potential storm is that India has to withstand?
Well, I don't know how long it will be, but I can say that India will be able to withstand it because India has seen much worse. As I said, the sanctions of 1974, far worse than what's happening now. We are in a way sanctioned now. There is a trade embargo in a way, even on services, as you said, H-1B visas. But what I find curious is this. If you, let's take theoretically, a low-end, a low-paid, not low-end, but low-paid Indian IT professional serving in the United States, say, is being paid 70,000 US. Now, you want to demonstrate to the MAGA constituency that we want jobs back for our own people, Americans, and we are willing to pay 100,000. So that means it's more expensive, but we will have our own people. But here's the catch. Many of these Indian Americans are US citizens. Where do they go? Where do they fit in? They are different from Indian nationals. Secondly, the US companies will, like Amazon, can relocate back office work in India, as used to be the case earlier. So that means the same problem remains for the United States. That means you are paying something like 70,000. I don't think these people would take less, operating from Bengaluru. So it doesn't give you the jobs that the United States president wants for Americans. But what it will do is to hurt Indian companies such as Wipro, such as TCS. TCS has more than 5,000 after Amazon, which is about 10,000. The TCS has about 5,000 visas right now, H-1B visas, is number 2. So they will definitely be hurt because they can't cough up 100,000 US dollars, rising steeply from 2 to 3,000 US dollars.
Yeah, and so some of these IT services firms in India might feel a little bit of a pinch, but there is the argument also, Ambassador Misra, that this could actually mean more the reversal of any brain drain that we're seeing coming out of India, and also that it's going to hurt the American companies more than their Indian counterparts. Do you share this as well? And does that basically mean that this H-1B visa headwind might not be as strong a headwind as we think it is, for India at least?
Well, I don't have a good answer to that question, but is India able to create jobs? My question would be, we are not. We have low skill levels, even among the educated people, even among the youths who are educated, and there's a lot of unrest, and we are not able to create productive jobs for people of adequate skills. That means people who are skilled enough to be productive. They are not very productive. Look at India's per capita GDP, $2,500. So India is a poor country. Let's not forget that. So I don't think I would be so triumphalist and say that it's going to hurt the American companies more than Indian companies. I don't have a good answer to that. But I think crisis is an opportunity. 1991 was a different kind of crisis for India. This could be an opportunity, but it has to be an all-of-nation approach. And I'm not so optimistic that all the people of India understand this clearly, that we really have to tighten our belts and work much harder to make this happen so that external pressures can't put us down.
Ambassador, you mentioned earlier on in the interview also the specter that is of Pakistan, especially given the very, very deep and painful relationship between the two neighbors, yourselves, that is in Pakistan. And we have also seen that the United States has started to make forays towards deepening relations, that is, with Pakistan. How is this being viewed in India right now? And are we seeing this clear, this clear dichotomy of the U.S. and India versus, say, China and Pakistan starting to blur somewhat?
Yes, it is beginning to blur because I think Trump's grand strategy is taking the U.S. foreign policy in a different direction. Under Biden, it was, well, China was not the existential threat even under Biden, but China was the competitor, it was number one. So China was targeted in some ways. But under Biden, there is a desire, under Trump, there is a desire to reset with China. I mean, they're going quiet on Taiwan, on the South China Sea, on issues that matter to Southeast Asians, for example. And of course, they are going quiet on India because of the China-Pakistan relationship. So if there is a desire to reset critical minerals, for example, AI. So China is a very powerful country. It's a near competitor, near peer of the United States. So therefore, it has much more leverage than a country like India on the United States, and relations between China and the US are much deeper than relations between the United States and India. And therefore, this is part of a much larger reset. There's not going to be a reverse Nixon, which is what we thought, because he's moving away from the Russians, and he's tilting towards China. So India has to have a kind of a strategy to deal with that, and that's why we have made a limited, I wouldn't say a reset or a rapprochement, but definitely a limited outreach towards China. As far as Pakistan is concerned, well, it's a perennial problem. I'm not so sure that the US will tilt completely towards Pakistan at the cost of India, which was the case in the 1950s and 60s. India was a much weaker country. India is far stronger today. And I've seen statements yesterday a US, I don't know who it was, one of the Secretary of Commerce, I think. We have a great relationship with India, and it's a privileged partner and that sort of thing. So it's a very mixed messaging, but mixed messaging is deliberate to confuse the Indians. This is part of normal diplomacy. So I don't know whether it will be a complete reset, but with China, there may be some kind of a deal which will be more economic. But for Trump, the economic is the strategic. So we'll wait and see.
Yeah, and since we are on the topic of China as well, a lot was made early a few weeks ago with regards to the SCO summit with Prime Minister Modi visiting China for the first time in about 7 years, and perhaps a thawing of relations, part of that strategic reset that you actually mentioned. But again, talking about complicated relationships, India and China itself have a complicated relationship and also a complicated history. How much are you reading into a possible thawing of relations between these two countries based on that visit, or are there miles and perhaps light years to go before something can actually happen with regards to a warming of ties?
I would take the latter view. Miles to go before I sleep, as Robert Frost said. I think China is giving India a hard time at the strategic level. At the tactical level, it is wooing China. China's strategy towards India is to coerce and seduce. So right now they are trying to seduce India. The ambassador makes these statements and the free Indian media laps it up. We are great friends and we shouldn't allow the border issue to define the relationship and so on and so forth. But India has been very careful. India did not join the virtual summit of BRICS. India did not join a threesome, India, Russia, China. Prime Minister Modi did not attend the Victory Day celebrations. These are very clear signals that there is a limitation to what India is going to do, though even Russia is with China on these issues, and of course Brazil in BRICS. So I don't think there is a real reset, and China's still putting enormous pressure on the border. There has been no de-escalation. There has been only disengagement. That means you are not eyeball to eyeball. You have moved back a few hundred feet here and there. The buffer zones still remain. There is no talk even of going back to a status quo ante before April 2020. Even India is not talking about it. So I don't see that there will be a reset between India and China. But and of course, China's relationship with Pakistan, our military leadership has said that, I quote, China gave live inputs during the 4-day war. So where is the question of a reset? But both sides will warily dance with each other and be watching for the next steps from the other side.
And, just finally, Professor, we did talk to a former diplomat as well from India, and he said that he believes that China's geopolitical strategy is to have a multilateral order for the world, but a unipolar order in Asia where China doesn't necessarily dominate, but is in the driver's seat with regards to what happens, and said that is something that India will probably not be able to agree upon, and they want more equal terms with regards to their standing in Asia vis-a-vis China. Do you agree with those sentiments, sir, that this might be a bit of a stumbling block in case India and China want to improve those relations?
This is the fundamental structural problem of the relationship. It is not just a stumbling block. China means, when it says we want a multipolar world, that means not a world dominated by the United States and we are the equals. When they talk of a multipolar Asia, it is just a ruse. What they mean is Asia dominated by China and everybody will be in a kind of a subsidiary relationship. You see, China has this middle kingdom concept. And this is very deeply ingrained in Chinese strategic thought. China is at the center of the world with the mandate of heaven for the emperor, and all of Southeast Asia, Mongolia, Japan, Korea, all the periphery is in a subsidiary relationship. But China doesn't have that strategy for India historically. India gave civilization to China in the first millennium. So do you think that India will ever accept that kind of relationship in Asia where China is the only tiger? Never. It will never happen, and that is the basic structural problem of the relationship that cannot be reconciled by resets and diplomatic steps.
And miles to go before relationships thaw, it seems, as you mentioned, with regards to India and China. Professor Jitendra Nath Misra, the former Indian ambassador to Portugal and Laos, thank you so much for joining us today on CNBC to help us make sense of the recent developments with regards to U.S.-India ties and India's own standing in this geopolitical world order. Let's keep talking about Trump's newest tariffs and how it could affect the Indian markets as well with Ekta Batra from CNBC TV 18. Ekta, let's talk about sectoral impact, if you can hear me. There's been a number of sectors that might actually feel a bit of a brunt. What are you hearing about how these industries are receiving the possible tariff threats, and what can we expect perhaps later on?
Well, it's early days in terms of what the impact could be in terms of, the job industry at this point in time, simply because the hope is that there could be some kind of negotiation, some kind of tariff deal which could probably come through when it comes to India and the US. But as of now, yes, there is obviously trepidation, especially in the gems and the jewelry and the textile industry, where there is, fear that the tariffs impact could be on a longer term. But just coming to what they've announced today or overnight is basically the United States said that they will be imposing 100% tariff on imported branded drugs, 25% tariff on import of all heavy duty trucks, as well as 50% tariff on kitchen cabinets. Now, what is going to impact the Indian companies the most is probably the fear that there could be more tariffs when it comes to pharmaceuticals, especially. Now, I say fear is because mainly we manufacture generic drugs. What the president has announced is basically focused on branded drugs, and hence maybe a lot of the Indian companies could be unscathed. But that doesn't really leave us out when it comes to any kind of future tariffs. But remember that generic drugs as a whole and the entire system currently is very critical for the US to be running as per, because of the drug prices or the generic drug prices which are available to them because of the Indian pharma clout and the Indian pharma manufacturing and the expertise that we have. There's a possibility that there could be some companies which could be impacted because of the 100% tariff on branded pharmaceutical drugs. But as of now, the impact is likely to be limited only possibly to one or two companies at this point in time. The other factor to watch out for is any kind of impact on the supply chain when it comes to pharmaceuticals. Is there going to be any kind of impact of tariffs on the API supply chain? Because eventually you could be manufacturing in the US, but where exactly are you sourcing your drugs from? Where is the back end happening? Is that part of the supply chain going to be tariffed is something that the street is going to watch out for. So yes, definitely very nervous times at this point in time to assess what exactly the impact could be going forward. But as of now, generic drugs seem to be unscathed. It's more for branded drugs. But let's see what the next steps could be from the Trump administration when it comes to drug prices and when it comes to pharmaceuticals as a whole.
And it's not just generic drugs as well, Ekta, right? Because India also is a major player with regards to vaccine production in the world. But I am curious as to whether or not this affects the chances of a U.S.-India trade deal, which the Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal is trying to inch towards. But again, if you keep on getting some of these new developments, disruptions, I mean, is it affecting the chances of getting to a deal that is favorable to both?
Well, yes, and on your point with regards to vaccines, absolutely, we produce majority of the vaccines in the world. But let's see what the policy would be on vaccines when it comes to the US. But nonetheless, we do supply vaccines to countries such as to continents such as Africa, Latin America. So our exposure when it comes to vaccines is much more than just the US. It is basically a very strong global position when it comes to vaccines. So hopefully there shouldn't be much when it comes to vaccine production and supply. But nonetheless, we seem to be quite hedged in that aspect. But separately, we do expect, or the street does expect, that the negotiations between the Indian government and the US government would continue on track, because the negotiations are continuing despite the 50% tariffs that came in earlier and were imposed on India. So despite all of the rhetoric, despite all of what has taken place, the negotiations are currently expected to, pick up some amount of pace. So we're not expecting any kind of impact in terms of the negotiations which are taking place between the US and India.
Dr. Batra from CNBC TV 18, thank you so much for bringing us the latest on what the reactions are to these latest slew of tariff threats from the Trump administration and its chance of possibly derailing a trade deal with the U.S. As we head into a break, we'll leave you with a look at the forex space. The dollar index is getting a lift overnight after America's Q2 GDP was revised upwards to 3.8%, its fastest pace in nearly 2 years. Inside India, we'll be back in about 2 minutes. Welcome back. Well, President Trump had a busy Thursday evening. Along with a series of new tariff announcements, he's also signed the executive order preparing TikTok for sale, valued at a cool $14 billion. CNBC's Elaine Yu is here to tell us what we know so far. Elaine, walk us through what's the latest with regards to this and what's behind that big and hefty price tag.
Yes, JP. So what we know so far, based on CNBC's reporting, is who's going to own the TikTok U.S. joint venture and the entity there. So an Oracle-led group will hold 45% in terms of their stake. ByteDance will have a 19.9% ownership stake, and ByteDance's investors and new shareholders will have the remaining quarter. And Beijing and ByteDance hasn't said anything new about this yet, so we're based off of what the White House is saying so far. And this is not a full sell of the algorithm, one of the most sensitive questions about this deal, but a licensing arrangement, and Oracle will spearhead oversight of American user data within the U.S. cloud infrastructure, and U.S. officials anticipate that the licensed algorithm will be retrained with American user data to make sure that it's working appropriately and addresses national security concerns. And Chinese media have also reported that ByteDance will set up a new U.S. entity that's part of TikTok U.S.'s restructuring. But this is Beijing shifting its stance from previous years, really. If you recall, Beijing had strongly opposed the demand to divest TikTok US. Back then, an official even said it's like daylight robbery. But in late 2020, it recognized the importance of the US market to ByteDance, and the Chinese government then revised rules on export controls on technology. So despite some concessions in this deal now, it's ceding direct control over U.S. data and how the algorithm will be applied there, but it still allows ByteDance to maintain access to TikTok's biggest overseas market at the U.S., which will preserve significant revenue streams and also likely the underlying intellectual property being the algorithm now. So for Beijing, this is pragmatic. It is promoting or protecting a very successful global Chinese tech company, and also showcasing its tech prowess even under immense American pressure. And analysts also have said that Xi cares much less about TikTok than Trump does. So this could be a pathway for them to move on to issues that Beijing cares much more about, JP.
Yeah, one step closer to that is the possible Americanization of TikTok, but as you mentioned, ByteDance still possibly holding a 19.9% stake. Elaine Yu, thank you for those very important details regarding the story that we're all following closely with regards to TikTok and the U.S. And we are counting down to the market open in India, and this is how we're shaping up right now. A final check of these gift Nifty futures show that they are still hopeful for a slight gain at the start of the morning session, but we keep in mind that the Nifty is off to a 5-day losing streak, and we'll see if today is the day they break through. Based on how much higher gift Nifty futures are trading over Thursday's close, it looks like hopes perhaps are just kept muted and modest right now for a possible gain. Of course, the Indian rupee also firming up against the U.S. dollar at 88.70, but keep in mind that it's dangerously close to that all-time low level of about 88.89, and we'll continue to monitor how the local currency, that is in India, trends against the almighty greenback. Now, a potentially big IPO that investors are eyeing from none other than Bourse operator NSE. Talk about it coming to market has been in the works for a while now, but it's still yet to clear regulatory hurdles. CNBC TV18 spoke to the NSE CEO Ashish Chauhan if they are any closer to listing. Here's what Chauhan said about a possible timeline.
We have been discussing with SEBI, and we had filed our application for settlement in June 2025, and we are awaiting the NOC. Once the NOC comes, as you know, it will take 4 or 5 months to prepare the RHP, and then another 4 or 5 months for SEBI to clear the RHP. So somewhere 8-9 months after the NOC is when the IPO can happen.
And let's get back to one of our top stories today. President Trump announcing a range of new tariffs a few hours ago. The United States is putting 100% tariffs on branded and patented pharmaceutical products, though companies with a manufacturing footprint in the U.S. will be exempt. He also announced tariffs on furniture like kitchen cabinets, as he says the U.S. market, that is flooded with cheap foreign products. He's also following up on his earlier duties on automobiles with a new 25% tariff on heavy trucks. C.S. Vigneshwar is the president of the Federation of Automobile Dealers Associations in India, here to join us about how this might possibly shake things up for the auto sector in India. Now, sir, I'd like to get your thoughts first with regards to some of these tariffs that were levied on trucks. I know they're not necessarily automobiles, but again, it is something perhaps that's really caught the eye once again for people in India, especially those following the mobility industry and also that of cars and trucks. What's been the initial reaction right now to these possible tariffs? And is there a concern that perhaps this might have a blowback effect on the broader automobile and auto industry out in India?
We hardly export any trucks over to the US, so I don't think it's a matter of concern for us. We export a lot of truck parts. We also export a lot of automobile components, but we don't export any trucks at all. So it's not much of a concern for India.
All right, sir. So let's talk about some of the positive things that perhaps are shaping the future for the car industry in India. Of course, I can imagine it's an exciting time based on the recent announcement of the early sales from the festive season based on the GST reforms and rationalization. How much of a buzz is this creating for some of your members and the broader auto industry out in India right now?
It's path-breaking and landmark reforms. For long, we've been asking for a simplified GST and a reduction in GST so that it could stimulate demand. And finally, the government has come up with its GST 2.0, which is fantastic, especially in the entry-level two-wheeler and the passenger vehicle segment. The costs have actually dramatically dropped. And this is very important to stimulate the market so that we have the bounce, so that customers come outside and shop. And it's not only for the automobile market. The complete product and services which is sold in India has seen a reduction in cost. So this would mean that the customers would be buoyant. They would be wanting to go out and shop, and so the customer buying pattern would be positively impacted. And all this also affects the circularity of money, and that really helps in terms of reviving buying behavior. So it's important. It's great. Yeah.
Go ahead, sir.
And we've also seen that in the first few days of the festive season, and the festive season also coincided with when the GST 2.0 kicked in. So it's been fantastic. Maruti Suzuki, which is the largest manufacturer in India, they have actually reported record numbers. Hyundai has also commented on record numbers. So every manufacturer has been very buoyant about it. We from the dealership community are quite happy about it, of course, because the customer gets a great deal and we also get an opportunity to do business with the customer. So that point of view, I think all the inquiries, even for the last 2-3 weeks, have been quite strong. The bookings also are picking up. And this particular reform, we don't see it for a festive period or for a month or a quarter. We think for the years to come, it'll have a positive impact on business.
Are there any specific segments that are seeing more demand than others or more love from these GST reforms than others, sir?
I think it's too soon to call. We probably need to wait for a week until the month end because it's just 4 days old. So we probably need to wait for it and then comment on it. But definitely the entry-level segments, which have been facing quite a lot of headwinds, the entry-level segment and the two-wheeler and the four-wheeler segment, have been having a good revival, so to speak, in the last few days. But we need to wait and watch, of course. And the tractor market, which has been doing badly for the last few years, has again seen a decent growth this year. And we believe that the good monsoons and would further help in terms of strengthening the tractor market further.
I'm curious about how sustainable this uptick in demand will be. If this is going to be just a one-time boost for demand, and you'll start to see growth, perhaps, perhaps normalize or even slow down in the coming years, or do you think that this the GST reforms will create some sustainable and long-lasting demand growth actually for the car industry and for some of the dealers out in India?
There have been some inflationary pressures in the past, but because of the GST reforms, I believe that the inflation is really going to drop. And if that's being so, customers have a good choice to go out and shop for a product at their cost, for a cost which is lower than what they had anticipated. So for me personally, if you ask me, I think my opinion would be this is a reform which is going to be sustained, and its impact is going to be long-term in a positive way.
Yeah. I know that it's only the start of the festive season, as you highlighted, about 4 days in, but are there any possible projections as to how strong sales are going to be by the time we get to the end of this lengthy and very exciting festive season for your industry, sir?
It should be around 10 to 15% growth over the previous festive season, so which is very good. We've already seen extremely strong inquiries and bookings happening. We wish it's going to continue. A lot of it also is the postponement of these inquiries and these interests shown in vehicles was postponed in the last 3 or 4 weeks. So that also could be an effect, but I believe that this is going to be sustained, and the whole of India is going to bear fruit, taste the fruits of this reform.
Sir, do you have any visibility on perhaps EV sales among the sales data that you're actually seeing right now, and how much of that is, if there's signs that it's taking up more sales share from the traditional ICE vehicles, or if we're still seeing similar proportions, that is, with regards to EV versus traditional car sales, for instance? What are the early numbers telling you about whether or not EV sales are picking up in India or not?
If you ask me about the last 4 days, I don't have data for it. But if you ask me in a slightly zoomed out fashion, 2023 and 24 had about 2.5% penetration of EVs. And this year, we have seen the penetration go as high as 5.5% in the last few months. I think it's something which is bound to happen. And this trajectory would be there. I don't know how fast it would happen, but slowly and truly, EVs are making an impact. Along with EVs, hybrids are at about 9%, and you have CNG and LPG also contribute. So all these four put together contribute right now at about 32% of the market. And it wasn't so 5 years ago. So I would rather, instead of saying EVs alone, alternative fuels is something which the Indian government is pushing, and the manufacturers are also helping that. So alternative fuels will slowly but surely take over to be the major component of the Indian auto industry.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Indian car industry and the car market. I believe it's the third largest now in the world. It continues to grow at a pretty significant clip, and we've seen a number of strong local brands and strong local manufacturers emerge. Do you see that there's a possibility that in the future India also becomes a significant exporter of cars, actually, outside of this fast-growing domestic market that you have? Or does the domestic market perhaps, is this going to dominate pretty much the trends and the development of this sector over the next 5 to 10 years?
The Indian automotive manufacturing scene is blessed by lower costs, highly skilled labor, and a good appetite by different companies, either from India or from abroad, to invest. Having said that, the domestic market itself is huge, where the companies can cater to it. But along with that, if they also concentrate on exports, a lot of companies are. If they concentrate on exports, the cost of production is going to come down for not only for the exported vehicles, but also for the vehicles sold domestically. Even right now, a lot of manufacturers are concentrating on export. Just an example, Ford being present in India just for exports. They don't sell any vehicles here. So and so does every other manufacturer. They do export a lot of vehicles. It's a great place to export. Even strategically, it's placed right in the middle of Asia. So it's very easy to export to Europe or America or Africa, or also other parts of Asia. So so a lot of manufacturers have also started concentrating on the export side of supply in India.
Okay, and I ask that also because there are a number of players that have expressed interest in entering this very fast-growing car market. I'm thinking about Vietnam's VinFast as an example, setting up a factory and also setting up a dealership network. I'm curious as to what might be key for VinFast or any car company that's coming into India to make sure that any entry into this fast-growing market is indeed successful, because while it's fast-growing, it's also very competitive. What do you think are the keys for players coming into the auto sector in India in terms of succeeding once they come in?
Number one would be the product, of course. The product has to be of extremely high spec at extremely competitive prices. So that's very a price sensitive market. Secondly, also in terms of availability of service, which gives a peace of mind during ownership, is extremely important. So having good dealers, good network spread out across the length and breadth of the country is extremely important. As long as they get these two right, I think the customers are happy buying a product from a particular manufacturer.
Yeah, so and one of the things that's also been established by VinFast is they want to roll out, I believe, more than 30 dealerships actually within by the end of this year. But when you compare that to dealership networks that some of the heavyweights in India have, in the thousands, for instance, it seems that there's a long way for them to actually develop a dealership network. How important is it for car companies coming into India to having a dealership network in the thousands to succeed? Or do you think that the sheer quantity of dealerships perhaps isn't as important as it used to be back in the day?
It's even more important these days to have a strong dealership network, but however, Rome wasn't built in a day. So the dealers also need to be sustainable. So well thought out, planned strategy in terms of dealership expansion would be great. First of all, establishing dealership networks in the main metros and other B cities, A and B cities are important. But today, the customers from the rural areas, from the smaller towns, are increasingly expecting dealerships to be set up in their towns too. So typically, it's easier to, most manufacturers have actually gone and set up in the larger cities and slowly expanded according to the sales volumes, which is how it has to be, because there's no point putting up thousands of dealership outlets and the number of vehicles being sold being less. So well-planned, incremental and sustainable increase in dealership volume according to the vehicle sales would be something which is optimal.
And what do you think are some of the challenges that car companies need to keep in mind when they're trying to expand their dealership networks in India? I can imagine it's a big country and there are a couple of things that they'll have to keep in mind. What do you think are some of the key challenges they'll have to remember if they do want to grow their dealership network in that sustainable and that strong fashion that you mentioned?
Number one, the dealerships have to be profitable, so decent margins. Also making sure that these Taj Mahals, as we call it, large white elephants, are not made. They are most of the dealerships these days. Companies have realized they need to be compact, need to be cost effective. So that needs to be kept in mind. And most importantly, they have to have decent products and constant introduction of products. So there has to be regular intervals in which products are being introduced so that there is excitement. Customers do come to the workshops, come to the showrooms, and so this has to be sustainable. And more importantly, the customers need to understand the Indian mindset. Sorry, the manufacturers need to understand the Indian mindset and also bring in products which are locally, designed for local use. The Indian market is quite interesting. As you mentioned, it's very large. We have fantastic highways. We also have roads which are not great. Our temperatures could go anywhere between minus 10 to minus 15 to plus 50 degrees Celsius. So vehicles need to be designed for all weather conditions, all kind of road conditions, and our customers are specifically demanding in terms of lower costs and very high spec in terms of features. So as long as the OEM keeps all this in mind, keeps the customer in focus, and also the dealer as a very important stakeholder in any decision made, I think they would see a lot of success in India.
Indeed, and also, as you mentioned, a very exciting time for the auto industry in India, especially with the festive season. The GST reforms already showing signs of making that big of an impact. CS Vigneshwar from the Federation of Automobile Dealers Association, we thank you so much for helping us understand exactly how much of an impact the GST reforms have had on early sales during this very important festive season. Well, markets in Mumbai have been trading for a few minutes now, and we'll bring you the early movers and shakers when we come back in about 2 minutes. Don't go away, you're still watching Inside India. about 6 minutes into the trading day out in India on the final trading day of this week, and we're seeing that the Nifty 50 might be on track for a sixth straight day of declines, currently down by about 0.4%. No doubt that the recent tariff issues and tariff proclamations might be just dampening sentiment out in Mumbai and across many markets across the world as well. We have to remember the Nifty 50 has tracked 5 straight sessions of losses and now is in the midst of its longest losing streak in about 6 months. We're also focusing on the rupee as well. After record weakness against the dollar, traders are telling Reuters that it's likely the Indian central bank might start selling U.S. dollars to support the currency. And currently, the Indian rupee is trading about 88.69 against the U.S. dollar. 88.88 is its record. It's its lowest levels on record, which is only tested just the other week. And of course, we want to take a look at how some of the movers in Indian markets today. And of course, we have to start with pharma stocks in focus after Trump levied a hefty new 100% tariff on the sector. The tariff applies to branded and patented drugs. And while India is mostly known for generics, it could be an issue for companies that sell vaccines or other patented pharmaceutical products. Take a look at the board there, and it's a wall of red right now. Sun Pharma feeling getting hardest hit right now, plunging by about 3.4% in the early minutes of the Friday trading session. We're also watching a couple of commercial vehicle makers, Tata Motors and Mahindra after Trump's 25% tariff on heavy trucks. Shares of Mahindra down by about 0.1%. Again, not a huge intraday decline. They're just easing off or taking a half step back in today's session. And Tata Motors actually finding room to go up by about 0.7% so far. We're also watching shares of Hindustan Aeronautics. And again, take a look at shares right now. Not really lift-off or blast-off for Hindustan Aeronautics, but they are up by about 0.1%. This after India struck a deal with HAL to buy locally built fighter jets from the state military plane maker. Take a look at shares now up by about 14.5% year-to-date and now at 4,782 rupees apiece. The $7 billion deal comes as India has been making a big push that is, for indigenous defense production at a time of rising global tensions and after India's recent armed conflict with neighboring Pakistan. The order consists of 97 Tejas Mk-1A jets to be provided over 6 years starting in fiscal year 2027. The order comes as the Indian military is preparing to decommission many of its aging Russian-built MiG-21 fighters. Demand for U.S. President Trump's so-called gold card is also expected to shoot up among wealthy foreigners after a very substantial price cut to $4 million. CNBC's Robert Frank has the details in his latest report.
The White House saying it will make 80,000 gold cards available in the coming years. Immigration attorneys and wealth advisors telling me that based on their initial response, they expect it will easily sell out. With his executive order last week, President Trump announced the new $1 million gold card that's going to grant foreign nationals residency and a path to a green card in, quote, record time. The price had been $5 million when he first announced it back in February. This price cut instantly makes the gold card one of the best deals in the global visa market. Singapore's golden visa, for instance, that requires an investment of up to $7 million. New Zealand's just under $3 million, and Bermuda's is $2.5 million. The costs in those other countries, of course, are considered investments, while the $1 million gold card is considered a, quote, unrestricted gift to the government. So gold card buyers won't get any of that money back. But advisors say the biggest demand for the gold card will likely be China, India, the Middle East, Brazil, and Mexico. With over 7,500 overseas millionaires expected to move to the U.S. just this year under existing programs, the gold card is expected to attract even more wealth to the U.S. For the full analysis of the gold card, the platinum card, and other immigration changes, you can go to cnbc.com/insidewealth. That's cnbc.com/insidewealth. Robert Frank, CNBC Business News.
And that's also all the time we have today on Inside India. But keep watching CNBC. That's because Access Middle East is up next. Have a great morning and have a great weekend ahead.